Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Tunnel Vision, a show brought to you by USCFootball.com. I'm your host, Keely. You're joined by Ryan Abraham and Shotgun Spratling. Shotgun, glad to have you back. Stuck in Provo last time, but we're glad to have you back. We got a good show for you today, previewing USC versus Utah, and a very important matchup in the Pac-12 South, but probably for USC as a whole. It might be a must-win for Clay Helton. We'll see going down the stretch. Crazy times at USC. And then, of course, we'll go over injury concerns. We just got the latest from Clay Helton in his Thursday presser, so we'll talk about that. If you have any questions for us, be sure to call in 512-4TUNNEL. We'll take your call on the air. Always a good time talking to you guys. You can also tweet at us, #TunnelVision. We'll put your tweet up on the screen and answer any question you may have. And, of course, wherever you're watching it, Facebook Live, YouTube, or Periscope, put your comments, questions, concerns, and we will address those. And Facebook, glad to have you back. Sorry about the technical difficulties last time, but we got it running this time. But guys, like I said, this is an important matchup. Probably the biggest thing. Brandon Peely said it's the biggest game of the season for them. So what are you looking forward to in this matchup?
Yeah, this is the one we talked about at the beginning of the season. You get the pen, the paper, you circle this one, USC Utah. It's going to determine the Pac-12 South. For USC to get to that next level, you go from 5-7 last year. You want to win the Pac-12. You got to start with the South, and to do that, you got to beat the Pac-12 preseason favorite to win the whole thing, the whole shebang, Utah. So this was very important. I talked to Dan Sorensen today. He's the publisher of the Ute Zone. They had the big rivalry game with BYU to start the season. Then they had a couple of cupcakes. Dave had this game circled as well. This is one that was really important for them. Utah has not won in the Coliseum. They did win way back in 1916 in Los Angeles, but they've not won in the Coliseum. There have been some crazy games played there where they've come in as the number 3 team in the country and lost. Touchdown scored at the end of the game that didn't get registered in Vegas for like 2 hours later. There's always kind of weird stuff going on. This is one of those things. I thought Kyle Whittingham last year got over the one hump by actually winning the Pac-12 South. Colorado had won the South. Arizona had won the South. Utah hadn't won the South, which is crazy. They did that last year. This year, they're focused on winning the whole thing, and it starts with beating USC. So this is a game both teams have circled, and it's all important in the Pac-12 South. You got to forget the BYU thing. Is it must win, whatever. You have to win this game if you're Clay Helton. If you don't win this game, 2 losses in a row, I don't know what is going to happen, but this is a must win for Clay Helton.
I think that it is exactly that. It is the game you circle on the calendar because they are the preseason, pick to win the Pac-12. So obviously in the South, everyone coming into the season said, well, USC's coming off 5-7, but they've got talent.
Yeah.
So if they can beat Utah, then yeah, they can win the Pac-12 South. So, but it comes down to beating Utah because do you really expect Arizona State, Colorado to beat Utah?
No.
Maybe.
ASU can be in like it'll be like a 7-9 game or something for them, but
Yeah, but you don't consistently expect a couple of teams to knock them off, which is what has to happen when you lose a game. You basically you lose the game, but you lose the tiebreaker, so you're basically 2 games behind. So you need the other team to lose a couple games. So that's why individual matchups can be so important in your division, and why the USC Utah game has taken on so much precedence the last few years. Is how important it is because of if you lose this game, it's that much harder to be able to bounce back to win the South. So I think USC has had this one circled. Were they overlooking it before? Overlooking BYU to get to this game? I don't necessarily think so, but maybe that had something to do with it. I
kind of want to hope so at this point because you already lost to BYU, so it doesn't matter if you overlook them. If you're focusing on this game, maybe that helps you, this one. I don't know.
Again, is it one of those things where you don't show certain things, early in the season against a non-conference opponent? I feel like you should have brought something else out if you had something that you were hiding back. But, they ran a lot of the same plays over and over, which is what this offense is going to do, especially the running plays. It was basically 2 running plays for most of the game. They were having a lot of success in that second, third, fourth quarter with some of that power play and stuff that they were doing. That's when Marquise Stepp got in the game. They're going more downhill and attacking that 3-man front. Well, you're going to 4-man front against Utah, but it's really, really good.
Yeah.
So how are you going to attack that? How are you going to find some room? I think that's the biggest matchup in this game is that offensive line versus their defensive line. If USC's offensive line does not play better than it did last week, they have no chance in this game.
100%.
That's what I was going to say. This seems just like a matchup in the trenches. It's all about who can get it done there, especially when you have guys like Tyler Huntley and Zach Moss who can burn you. what are you expecting? Because as Shotgun mentioned, I think BYU was able to get it done with 3 down linemen. Utah's going to have 65 starts between all 4 down linemen. How do you expect USC's offensive line to bounce back on a short week?
Yeah, it's going to be tough because you're talking about 5 defensive tackles that could all play in the Pac-12 that rotate in. Bradley and I led the Pac-12 in sacks last year. He's an absolute stud. They got plenty of guys in that front. And the one thing we have is, and you don't get this all the time, especially with a matchup like this, we have a common opponent within the first 3 weeks of the season played on the same field. So it's not like a home and away thing. Utah went to Provo, USC went to Provo. It was a close game with Utah and BYU early. And Utah definitely won the turnover battle. They had a couple of pick sixes, but they dominated the game on the ground in the second half, unlike what USC was able to do. We saw it was sort of a rebuilt Utah offensive line. They had to replace their left tackle and left guard, but they had 3 starters returning. They kind of moved around a little bit, but they ran the ball really well. Zach Moss had 180 yards or something like that against that 3-man front where they dropped a bunch of guys into coverage. I think Utah only threw 2 passes in the second half of that game. Different than what we saw with USC. They ran the ball okay, but just not great. It wasn't 3.8 yards a carry instead of 6. So we have this common opponent. You know what Utah was able to do, and USC wasn't able to do that. Well, now you're playing a defensive front that's kind of like BYU except on steroids. You got these, it's crazy. Utah is so good. Now you're going to have to play better. Now, it's at home, so maybe that helps. But the way this offensive line played on the road against the 3-man front, I just don't think it's not going to translate to, if you can't play against BYU, you're going to play well against Utah. I mean, you really are going to have to step up your game this week.
I mean, it starts in the middle. With Brett Nealon struggled against Tonga from BYU. The big guy there, I think he was 320 pounds. Well, the guys that are coming in, you got Leki Fotu, who's 335 pounds, 6'5", whereas Tonga was, I think, 6'3" or 6'4". And then John Penasini, he's 320 pounds. So you got 2 guys that are 650 pounds combined. And those guys are
like a Volkswagen or something.
And Fotu was a first-team All-Pac-12 last year. Penasini was second-team All-Pac-12. So, those are really good guys there. So, as much as USC struggled there, what did they do to change things? They left Nealon, basically single-covered a lot, giving him a one-on-one block there. And it's tough to block that head-up nose because, especially Tonga, give him a lot of credit. He was firing off the ball for much of the game. A lot of times, by the time the snap was, between Nealon's legs, he was trying to block somebody as well. So, it's very difficult to do that. And Tim Drevno even said, I think it's the hardest position to play, especially when there's a a head-up nose guard like that besides quarterback. So if that's the case, he's not necessarily going to see that this week if they go with a 4-man front. A traditional 4-man front is going to be over the guards. But how do they counteract the attack in the middle of the line? Because there's so many times where USC wasn't necessarily trying to run right behind the center, but the center would be pushed back 3 or 4 yards, and suddenly the running back has to widen out where he's going, or the nose tackle was just blowing up a lot of things. Tonga and their backup as well. So USC's got to fix that, and if they can control the middle, then that gives you so many more options. You can start doing more things with the offense in the run game to start with, and the pocket's not collapsing on a true freshman quarterback, which is probably the most important thing there.
Yeah, that's the key. There's a true freshman quarterback. You're going to have to protect him. You're going to have to run the football, and if you can't do that, it's going to put all, you're talking about a kid that went on the road, turned the ball over 3 times. You need to get him some protection. You need to be able to run the football. And that means the offensive line is going to have to play a lot better than what we saw last week.
Yeah, without a doubt. Now, when it comes to the other side of the ball, you kind of talked about it already, Ryan, but containing the edge, perimeter defense, that's something that USC's defense has struggled with, as well as tackling. We've talked to the coaches about that and how they're trying to fix that, but you have such a crazy matchup. It's basically Utah's strength versus USC's defense's weaknesses. How do you fix that up when it's just looking like a nightmare matchup for this USC defense?
Yeah, Tyler Huntley has put on like 15 pounds of muscle. He talked about wanting to be more of an explosive offense. We haven't really seen that. And they didn't need to do that much against BYU. The last game, it was Idaho State. They had some more explosive plays, like an 84-yard touchdown pass and stuff. But they didn't need to do that against BYU. They ran the football more. But Zach Moss is a home run threat there. He's powerful. He can get on the edge and the outside and really beat you with some of those long runs. And Huntley, he's very mobile too. He would get banged up a lot throughout his career, so that's why I think he put on the extra muscle just to give himself a little bit more armor. But I think he's going to want to show people he can throw the football against this USC secondary. So you got to defend both. When you got a mobile quarterback, like you said, that's not been one of USC's strengths. You're trying to contain and stop the edge rushes from happening. That's something that Utah does really well, and USC doesn't. So it's going to have to be a reverse, where you're saying, like, hey, this has been a weakness for USC so far. Maybe it's going to be a strength. Heck, I watched the Arizona game, and they played Texas Tech. Their defense was absolutely garbage for the first 2 games. They went to Hawaii and lost. And then they looked great, like in the 3rd game. So it's not like you can't change. You can change things, but they're going to have to look a lot different than what we've seen for the first 3 games from USC. They just haven't been able to contain that. And if you do that to Moss and Huntley, it's going to be trouble.
Yeah, football's a game all about matchups. Unfortunately, you say, or usually you go, well, we have good matchups here, here, here. Unfortunately, like Keely said, it's USC's weaknesses against Utah's strengths. So how does USC counteract that? What can they do differently there? Those are going to be the questions you're looking at. Can you find space and room for Keaton Slovis to work? Utah, after watching the BYU game, you got to assume that they're going to throw some drop 8 in there. They're going to drop some guys back and force him to beat them with, in some zone coverages and different things like that. But they're going to do what they do most of the time. So it's not going to be the same, game plan that you saw from BYU. They're going to attack with their defensive line. They like to get after the quarterback. I was talking with Jalen McKenzie earlier this week, and he told me that the linebackers actually play more like Stanford, which maybe that's a good thing for USC. Just the way, because BYU is kind of a 3-3 stack, and those guys were able to come downhill, and they were able to avoid blocks a little bit more. Whereas Stanford, they're trying to, kind of read and react to what you're doing rather than trying to attack as much. So I think that maybe that plays in USC's favor. And if that's the matchup, that's a big key, because USC struggled to run because they couldn't get to the second level and hold on to their blocks. There were times when they would get 5 or 6 yards and there was a 12-yard gain there. Yeah. There's times when they get 4 yards and there was an 8 or 9 yard gain that was available, but they just weren't able to hold on to a block. How do they do that against against Utah's linebackers? Because Utah's linebackers are really thin. Obviously, they lost the Penn State transfer before the season. They've lost a couple more guys. So if you can get an advantage there and they're able to get to the second level, maybe then USC can have some success running the ball.
Yeah.
Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, this is such an important matchup, not only for USC, but Clay Helton and his future going forward. I mean, I know in my season prediction, I had USC losing to Utah, UW, and Notre Dame. It's just a tough stretch. How important is it for USC and Clay Helton to get maybe a win against Utah and have that at least confidence in the South race for now?
Yeah, to me, it's all important. And I think if you beat BYU, you might have, there may be some grace that you lose to the preseason favorite in Utah. But it means you're going to have to go on the road and beat like a Washington or Notre Dame or both of those. But right now, sitting at 2-1 and knowing you have those 2 road games coming up, I don't think there's the margin for error is all gone. To me, you lost a game you could not afford to lose. That was a team that's not as good as you. There's a major talent advantage. Yeah, it's on the road. But they're in the middle of a stretch where they played Utah, Tennessee on the road, and they got Washington up next. So they were in a really tough schedule too. They had USA at home. That was a game that BYU circled. To me, that's inexcusable. Like, you cannot lose that game. And now, because you're coming off a 5-7 season, there wasn't any grace period. So that's over with. Like, you have to basically win out now. So you can't. That's why I say this is a must-win game. You got to go out and beat Utah. You're not favored in the game. It's only a 4-point spread, so it's not terrible. Utah's never won in the Coliseum. Certainly, it's a winnable game, but now you have to. Right? And you're not going to be a better than 50% chance to win this game, but you have to go out and win it, because losing to BYU, I think, is the beginning of the end. That's the way I feel. It's my opinion on it. It sucks. You don't want to predict people getting fired or anything like that, but coming off last year, you made all these changes. You had to show improvement. It wasn't about what you say. It was about what you do, and you went out and you didn't do it against BYU.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no breathing room. There's no space there. The hot seat doesn't. You don't get to rise up off of it and let things cool off a little bit. No, it's on you, and the seat's only getting warmer and warmer when you lose to a team like BYU, especially knowing the stretch that you have. You could be 3-0 and you got this gauntlet of 3 games. Now you're 2-1. And you got Utah, Washington, and Notre Dame.
Yeah, you're staring at 2-4 potentially in the face.
So, I mean, it's a really tough stretch, but it starts with focusing on this game, making adjustments from what you've done the first couple games that were unsuccessful. I mean, there were things in that that BYU game that they could have done a lot better, especially on the offensive line. If the offensive line plays well, like it did in the first 2 games, then USC's offense can move the ball. Especially the Stanford game, the offensive line was really good. I mean, there was a lot of man coverage, which gave Keaton Slovis extra opportunities, but they protected him well.
Yeah.
And they ran the ball well enough when they did, the few times they ran the ball that game. So I think it starts with that offensive line, and if they play well enough, then USC's in this game.
You've said that before, I
I
think.
feel like I've said that before.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe it was me and Keely were talking about how the offensive line was the key this season, and you didn't believe us. No. That's been Shotgun's MO. And it's completely. I think if the offensive line plays better in this game, they beat BYU. But now, yeah, like I said, there's no breathing
Utah?
room.
Yes,
I'm
Utah.
sorry. Well, no. For the
Oh,
last
got it,
game.
got it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna get more into this game because we have a lot of questions. We also have 3 callers on the line, so we'll get to that next. But an interesting wrinkle about this game at the Coliseum on Friday. It's a Fox Crew, but the pregame and postgame show has Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush returning to the Coliseum, and Urban Meyer, who USC fans, most of them want to be the next head coach at USC. This is just such a fascinating dynamic having these guys on the Coliseum field. Basically, it's just such an interesting dynamic.
USC, after the Fresno State game, people were excited to see the team out. They weren't really impressed. Beating Stanford, though, people were kind of like, oh, this could be a good team. And then losing to BYU kind of takes the wind out of the sails. And coming to this game, I did a preview article with the Ute Zone guy, Dan Sorensen, and he had asked me what the atmosphere was going to be like. I'm like, it's hard to say. There's some of the, losing to BYU, there's a lot of the fans have kind of lost that fire that they had after the Stanford game. They're sort of down, but they're extremely excited to see Reggie Bush come to the Coliseum for the first time in 9 years or whatever it was, because the NCAA won't let him be around the program anymore. He's going to be there doing the pregame show for Fox Big Noon, and is that what it, the Big Noon kickoff, and the halftime show. And then Urban Meyer, who, by the way, coached Utah to a 12-0 season way back in the day before he won national championships at Florida and Ohio State. He's going to be there as well. And you can't find, if you do hashtag USC on Twitter, pretty much every other tweet's going to be about, hey, is Urban Meyer coming to USC? So if you wanted to add a little extra drama to this game where maybe some of the wind has been taken out of the sails for on the USC side, now there might be a little bit more excitement just for the pregame show and the halftime show.
I mean, Trek Ranger asked, does the stadium crowd scream for Reggie or for Urban?
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing. And then another question, though, is I think DM asked was, at what point does the crowd start chanting, we want Urban, we want Urban?
They're going to be in the Coliseum like at halftime. Like,
It's crazy. That's
what
I'm
if
saying.
USC's like losing? Like, I think they'll cheer Reggie first, but if like halftime and USC's losing, there's definitely going to be some Urban chants.
Yeah, this is crazy.
knows?
Also, like the logistics of Reggie Bush being back in the Coliseum, like can USC even put him on the screen? Like, is that something that they can do?
Yeah, who knows? I
It's
think you
just-
should just do it anyway. Like, screw the NCAA. You should do that.
Have him run him out the tunnel.
I mean, he's working there at the game. You want to put him on the screen. And,
So that was what I read, was the statement given from USC that he's allowed to be there because he's in a working capacity.
yeah.
So does that mean he can only be, he's restricted to only working stuff, or can he give a pregame speech
Can
or
he run
something?
out of the
Can he
tunnel?
run- there's a lot of questions there.
So my question was when Reggie Bush came into the locker room in the 2015 Pac-12 championship at Levi Stadium, what was the work around that? Just because they were not at USC?
Because they were honoring the Pac-12, I think it was 100 years, the top
Yeah.
100 players or
Yeah.
something. He was on an all Pac-12 greats team, so they were honoring them all before the game. So he was there on the Pac-12's behest, not on USC.
Yeah.
So
Hashtag free Reggie, guys.
Interesting. Yeah, for sure. Let's actually go to some live
We got
calls.
him, yeah.
Yeah, let's go to our first one. I believe his name is Bobby. Hello, you're live on Tunnel Vision.
How you guys doing tonight?
What's up, Bobby?
First and foremost, I got to make 2 quick apologies. Number one would be to you, Ryan, for what I'm about to quickly say to Shotgun. I look forward in a month from now for your basketball coverage. Number one. Number two, I have to apologize to Number two, I have to apologize to Dan Weber because the reason for the call is my new best friend, Brad Crawford. Have you guys seen the article that you posted on the 247 Sports Board?
Yeah. So he's talking about. So Brad works for 24/7 Sports in Nashville, and they aggravate some stories to our front page.
Aggregate.
Aggregate. Did I aggravate it? I'm aggravated. No. They aggregate stories to the front page, and it was about a Sports by Brooks tweet or something, I believe, if that's the one.
It was his live show.
Oh, from his live show. Okay.
Yes. He's talking about that. He wants us to talk about that.
Right. So what was said in the?
So basically, what Brooks said was that his sources say that Carol Folt doesn't want Urban Meyer as the new USC head coach. Now, granted, on Tunnel Vision, we've said we don't like talking about new coaches if there's not an opening, but we'll do this for this question. But if Wayne Hughes is involved somehow, that might still happen. His sources basically were kind of all over the place, but he was saying that watch out for Clay Helton maybe getting fired after between the bye week before Notre Dame if they get blown out by Utah and UW.
Yeah, and I think he mentioned Rick Caruso, the
Yeah.
head of the board of trustees. He said he's an Urban Meyer fan. So yeah, Brooks does a live show every day. Actually, a lot of times in this studio right
He's
here.
like literally right here.
He's like where
I'm sitting.
Keely is. Yeah. So yeah, I mean I don't know. I'm just he's back in the game again. It's an interesting story. I mean. Don't know at this point.
Yeah, so that's one report from Brooks, but we don't know, and so we'll leave it at that. But thanks for calling in, Bobby. We appreciate it. Let's go to our next caller. I believe it is Joshua. Hello, you're live on Tunnel Vision.
Hi, this is Josh from Palmdale. How are you?
Good.
Hey, Joshua, thanks for calling.
So my question is, I was reading a report from Rain of Troy this morning where they did something really interesting. They analyzed the USC versus the Utah, like every part of the game, and Utah was favored in every aspect of the game except for I think like wide receivers or something. I want to know how realistic is it that Utah comes away from the Coliseum with a win? I know that they haven't come into the Coliseum with the win ever, but the article also said that they're putting the best team on the field since Urban Meyer's undefeated team in 2004. And USC, through these 3 games, haven't been very consistent with their performance. I just want to know what you guys think.
Yeah, first of all, never read Reign of Troy. Like they're terrible. No,
False.
we love those guys. Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't read that article yet, but it does make sense. I mean, if you're looking at the matchups, there was a little bit of a rebuild for the Utah offensive line, but there are a lot of starters that came back and they've played really well. They haven't given up a sack yet. They're running for crap loads of yards. I mean, you have a feature back. You have a really dynamic quarterback that runs their system well. Britton Covey, they got a couple other wide receivers I think that can burn you. So, I mean, I think offensively they're good, but, USC's receivers are better. And you can't compare the defensive line. It's one of the best in the country. Secondary, I think, is definitely better at Utah, Jalen Johnson and all the guys they have there. Maybe the linebacker stuff because there's some injuries, but for sure. And then Utah special teams are always great, and USC's are not.
Always special.
Yeah, they're special. Yeah. So and we talk about being a game of matchups. Yeah, but USC's still a super talented team, and I wouldn't be shocked if they come in and beat the Utes. But if Utah comes out and wins by a couple of touchdowns, that's what happened last year in Salt Lake City. We were there. I mean, if that happens again, I can see that happening again for sure. It's just USC doesn't seem to be in the same place as they need to be.
He said, "How realistic is it for them to come in?"
Very
they're
realistic.
they're picked to win. So
they're the favorite. Yeah.
It's not like it's people are going to be shocked if they win.
No.
If USC comes, the only shocking result in this, close game blowout is if USC blows out Utah.
Yeah.
And even then, you might go depending on how it plays out because this has happened before in 2015.
2015, number 3 in the country.
Yeah, Utah was ranked number 3. Cam Smith intercepts 3 passes, takes one of them back to the house. USC blows them out. So even then, you go, well, USC's got talent. You'd be like, I'm surprised a little bit by Utah that they didn't play up to their expectations because everyone expects them to win the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Or they were the pick. So that would be the only. That's the only one that's not realistic, I guess, or the only one that'd be surprising. The other one's like, okay, USC wins a close game, Utah wins a close game, Utah blows them out. They did it last year, so all those would be like, okay, I could have seen that easily.
It's a really good Utah team. It's better, I think, than what the team they had in 2015. There's not a lot of flaws in this team.
Better quarterback play.
Yeah.
Zach Moss is one of the best running backs in the country. So you got that, and their DBs are really good. So that they match up really well against USC.
Yeah.
Where they're their strongest, USC is at their weakest, and where USC is strong, they also have quality depth at those spots too. So
Yeah. Interesting matchup for sure. Thanks so much, Josh, for the call. We appreciate it. Let's go to our next caller. Hello, you're live on Tunnel Vision.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Good.
Yeah, just calling. I hear about your shows or on your podcast about the false positive with the Stanford. How do we not know that the BYU game with Utah is not a false positive? That's their rival, just like Stanford is our rival. So if they had a common opponent, let's say Stanford, and they won 30-27 on overtime, we would say, well, SC had the chance. That's their common opponent, and SC blew Stanford out. So how do we – I know they're talented and they had a great coach, but can't we look at it that perspective that BYU is their false positive?
That's an interesting.
So sorry, I muted him.
Yeah, interesting point. Where I think you could look at two things. Is that a false positive in the early game? Now, I haven't gone back and looked at Utah's won 8 years in a row or something, or 9 years in a row. They beat them. But is USC's play at BYU a false negative? I mean, there's another thing there too. So I think there's two aspects you could look at. We showed the history of why Stanford is a false positive, just because you've seen that it hasn't been a defining win for the program. It's just that the team doesn't seem to go the way they do at playing Stanford. But I guess that's a potential one for Utah as well.
I think that's hard to necessarily say because it's a different type of rivalry game, and it's not conference. You're not saving anything for that game necessarily. It's just a little bit different, I think, element. But I think the better question is the USC BYU a false negative?
Yeah.
Is it just okay? Well, they turned the ball over 3 times.
Yeah.
And the freshman quarterback learns from that. He learns from his mistakes, and he still threw for. I think Clay Helton was applauding his completion percentage. Still, actually, their adjusted completion percentage. Tyler Huntley's number 1 in the country because I think you said he has 12.
He has 12 incompletions and 6 drops.
Yeah,
so he only has really 6 passes that didn't get completed.
So that's the adjusted completion percentage. PFF does it, so he's at 90% completion percentage, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But Keaton Slovis is like 6th in the country right now. He's like 83.1 with adjusted. So you say maybe he figures out what he did wrong with those zone coverages, and he was skipping some reads and stuff. That's what Harrell and Helton said, and something that we actually point out in our film study, which will be up tomorrow. But if he fixes himself, and he calms down a little bit in the pocket, it was just a road game. He learns from it. He goes back to hitting like he did in the Stanford game. You go, okay, maybe that was just one bad game, and USC actually can play. But I think there's more to it than that, obviously. But maybe that's a possibility. Yeah. I think that's more of a possibility than necessarily looking at the BYU game as a false positive for Utah.
And Utah's secondary is way better than BYU's, I think. But they're probably going to play. They play a lot of man, and he did well against man coverage. And Paul Debo's a really good cornerback. So who knows? I mean, maybe this the matchup, and maybe Utah switches things up. But there's I see the caller. He wanted a little bit of light at the end. He wanted some hope to grab onto. Yes, there's definitely hope. USC's got USC should be in every game because of the roster. So it's definitely possible.
And remember, they were up on Utah last year, too.
True.
Yeah.
They were 14-3, and then
Yeah. Well, you also have 2 quarterbacks getting hurt in that game as well.
So don't go up 14-3 in this one is the key.
Just don't go up 14. That seems to be the kiss of death.
Yeah.
But thanks for the call. We appreciate it. We have more callers, but let's jump into some questions. Oscar on YouTube said, do you think if Keaton Slovis has 2 or more picks this week, he will be out?
Nope.
It depends on how, if it's tip passes like that, if it's balls off the receiver's hands, it makes it a lot different. I don't think so, though. I just think they're giving him the leash, and now if it's really bad ones, then maybe that's when you start looking at it. If you throw it right to a guy again, those type of things. Give credit to the BYU defenders too. Some pretty nice interceptions.
Yeah.
They made, or the receivers too. They made a lot of nice catches in that game. The first interception was great. The linebacker just laying out and catching that one. So I think that give them a little bit of credit. If it's really nice plays like that again, you're not going to hold it against him as much, I'd say. But if he's throwing balls right to the other team, then maybe you're like, this is not working. We got to do something else. And maybe the reason why there might be a change is because Matt Fink brings a different element. And you can run read option stuff. I mean, they run the read option with Keaton Slovis, but he never runs it. It's more when he does a run option, it's a run pass option. He'll fake the handoff and then maybe he'll throw it. So if you decide that, hey, this game plan is just not working, let's go to the true read option and try that. And Fink had a little bit of success in the second half. The game was already gone out of hand, but he had some success in the second half of that game last year too. So.
Well, in the same vein, Trojans said Fink played really well against Utah last year. Any chance we may see Fink come in, particularly if Keaton struggles?
See, I don't think this is happening at all. He could throw like 3 horrible picks into triple coverage that were the complete wrong reads, wrong decisions, or bad throws, And I think they made the decision to go with Keaton Slovis. And I can't imagine what it would take to reverse that, because it's basically admitting that you were wrong. So I don't think, I mean, they've already lost to BYU, so it's like there's no like.
I don't know. Your job's on the line, basically.
Yeah.
If you're backed into a corner, even if you've
if you're throwing 2-3 picks already, like you're going to lose the game.
What if it's 9-6? Who knows?
Yeah.
You hold them to field goals.
I just have a hard time picturing this coaching staff switching like where they are.
True, but when you're backed in the corner, things change.
This isn't like a Sam Darnold on the bench. It's like it's Matt Fink. Like Slovis is he's your upside guy, I think, in their mind. So I don't know if they would go away from their upside guy.
Yep. I'm not sure.
It's a great question. I have a really hard time picturing them going away. Like what kind of leash he has. I think it's a pretty long leash.
It sounds like it's long. When we've asked, they've just said, it's if production drops, I think it would have had to be really bad. Like where he can't get anything off without having it be interception or something like that. Just not good.
Yeah.
We have a lot of interception questions from that. Zach said, can we please replace Vi with Step? I believe Step is better at what they want from running back. Should we pressure Utah's defense with counters and sweeps?
Well, I think you talked to Mike Jenks this week. It sounds like they like their rotation with the two guys, with Vavae Malepeai and Stephen Carr. I think specifically what they needed to do against BYU, Marquis Step would have been good. They needed that downhill kind of just pound through sort of thing, and they didn't do it as much. But I think he should be definitely used in more situations, but I don't think they're gonna.
It just depends on the game plan and how you're trying to attack. If you're running counters and sweeps, that's not a Marquis Step specialty.
Yeah.
If that's what you think you should pressure Utah's defense with, then I feel like your thoughts are going in two different directions here. If you're running counters and sweeps, that's more Stephen Carr style.
Yeah.
Maybe Vi's kind of the in-between guy that can do everything well and maybe not anything exceptional, whereas Step is the bruiser, Stephen Carr is the make-you-miss guy, but it comes down to pass protection. It comes down to hitting the right hole. There's times when Marquis Step missed a couple of opportunities in the last game, and I think they're concerned about, one, the ability to catch the ball in the backfield and the ability to protect the quarterback. Those are two things that no one thinks about. You look at yards per carry, but you don't think about that with a third-string guy a little bit. I think that's the areas where he still has to improve, and he's a young guy. And how much did he get the ball thrown to him in high school? How much was he asked to protect a quarterback in high school? Those things don't happen as much with true bell cow running backs. So that's the area where they have to grow. And I don't think Step is – I think Step is good, and I think he's eventually going to get his turn, kind of like Akasedrick Ware, worked and worked and worked. I don't think he's Ronald Jones, where you're like, this guy just you get him the ball and electricity can happen.
Yep.
So I don't think it's necessarily the same there, but I think there is a place for him. Like you said, especially when the game plan changed in the game. They actually changed their game plan in this. They were not pulling the guard. I have to go back and check to make sure, but I'm pretty sure until Marquis Step came in the game, the drive he came in. So they used it earlier in the drive before he came in. But until he came in the game, that drive, they weren't pulling the guard on that power play that they were running, and they started having so much success with both Vi and him.
Yeah.
So I think they made some adjustments in game because they're saying, hey, the linebackers are getting too much run. They're able to get to the ball when we're going side to side. Let's try to attack straight downhill, and that's when you need a guy like that.
The big one,
yeah. You bring in the big guy, let him barrel through guys, and even if he misses the hole, which happened a couple times, he still was picking up 5-6 yards because he's exploding through the hole instead of letting those linebackers get to him going side to side.
Yeah, they're a little concerned about some fumbles with him too. He put the ball on the ground once, so.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing, though, is that Clay said that that's the reason why they didn't play him more, but that fumble happened in, the middle of the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
so.
And it's not something that we've seen from him because he got a lot of carries in the fall and spring, or early in the fall and the spring because the other guys were being saved or just, were nicked up. So, he got a lot of opportunities. It's not like, oh, well, he's got a fumbling problem. That was never something we thought, necessarily. So maybe it's sprung up since we can't watch practices now. But I doubt that that's the case. That was kind of a weird thing to say.
Yeah. Jesse on YouTube, who I think is a noted UCLA fan who watches anyway, he said, if USC loses Friday and the Pac-12 South slips away, will we see a problem with motivation to finish the season?
I mean, it's weird. Chuck and I were talking about this offline because I was answering some questions for our Utah site for a preview in this game and seeing what the team attitude was like. And, Clay Helton's attitude is always going to be positive. He's going to try to spin everything like, the offensive line played well. We ran the ball great. And say things that maybe the fans don't really agree with all the time, but even the players seem to be, it wasn't like you didn't go in there and to practice and talk to people and feel like there was guys that had a chip on their shoulder. They were, frustrated with losing to BYU, so pissed off. They were so mad. Like, you didn't get that sense. It was sort of like, hey, man, we're going to get them this time. It was just sort of like, buck up. Everything's going to be okay. So I don't know. I mean, it just doesn't seem like losses affect this team all that much. And maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe it's a good thing. But it doesn't seem like they're all down in the dumps and they're not going to be able to get up for this game. But they also, you saw Washington lose to Cal and then beat the snot out of Hawaii the next week, like scoring 52 points, which Washington doesn't do. They took out their frustrations for losing. They didn't want to lose that game. They took out their frustrations. I don't know. I'm not seeing USC doing that, but that would be a great motivator for them to come out and like, hey, we're so mad we lost to BYU. This is kind of like the same team. Let's just pound the crap out of these guys. And I'm not sure. Just from what we've seen and talking to people, it didn't seem like that's really kind of the forefront of everyone's mind.
And I kind of asked some of the players after the Stanford game, like, hey, is this a statement for you guys? This, show that for the Pac-12 and maybe even the country that you can put up points on the board, especially the offensive side. You can put up points on the board and you can, score against the defense. And then you see Stanford go to UCF and just look terrible. And you go, maybe that wasn't a statement for USC more so as it was Stanford.
Yeah.
But this is an opportunity to make a statement. Whatever your mindset coming into it, we go out and win this game against a top 10 team and we take over control of the Pac-12 South because you're 2-0 in the Pac-12 then. That's something that can motivate you for the rest of the season. But if you lose that game, it is a concern.
Yeah.
How mentally tough is this team? We asked that a couple times going into the season. They showed some mental fortitude against Stanford. I don't think that there was ever a point in the BYU game where you're just like, yeah, they're done. They've shut down.
They were in it, yeah.
I mean, it was just a back and forth game, and they made mistakes, but it wasn't like it was just they were out of it, mentally out of it. So I think that at least on that forefront, it seems like USC has improved from last year.
Yeah,
Yep.
There's going to be eyeballs on this game.
Yeah,
100%. Like
Friday
people are going
night.
to watch this. Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, Urban Meyer,
Yep.
Brady Quinn.
Yep.
Rob Stone. No one really cares about those guys. They care about the other guys. But yes. So people will be watching. So you can make a statement. You can bounce back from the BYU loss, which I think is devastating, if you go out and run the table like you talked about. Clay Helton mentioned that in the Sunday conference call, 2016, when USC lost to Utah. He feels this is a special team. Well, we got to see it. It's Friday night. If this is a special team, you'll see it. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, but they have a chance to show everyone that they are a special team.
In the same vein, Gerald on Facebook said, if USC beats Utah, will it actually matter? USC is so inconsistent that we might see that win as a fluke and not actually as a good win. Thoughts?
It's
a possibility.
Good. It's a
Yeah.
good win, though. I mean,
It's a good win, but it's still. I don't think if USC comes out and wins against Utah, I will be like, yeah, I know who this team is. Like, I won't know who this team is.
Yeah. I mean, you'll know in 3 weeks, or you'll know by the bye week because you're going to play. It's like, what is your record at that point? You got through this really tough 6-game schedule. Are you 3-3? Are you 4-2? Are you 5-1? There could potentially be 5-1. Are you 2-4? Like, that's a potential too. So I think the record's going to define you. There's no talk. There's no, we're working towards this, or there's a freshman quarterback, so we're young. Like, all that stuff, no. It's like your record is going to say what you are. You needed to be better after last year, and your record is going to be who you are. Mm-hmm. I mean, it always is, but even more so this year.
Yeah, I mean, USC has been inconsistent, so you could be like, yeah, they finally no, okay, that was just that game. And again, it's because football is a game of matchups. Because certain teams you're really good against certain styles, and you're really bad against other ones. The best teams find a way to be good at all of them.
Yeah,
and then lose to Clemson multiple times in the playoff. Just speaking of Alabama.
Yeah.
Let's actually go back to some callers because we still have a lot in the queue right now. So let's go to our first caller. Hello, you're live on Tunnel Vision.
Hi, this is Wagner from Long Beach. I had a comment and then also a question for you guys. My comment was that I see Clay as a 8-9 win kind of coach, or he'll consistently give you 8-9 wins and maybe give you a good win every so often, just like he did with Washington a couple of years ago. So my question to you guys is based on the administration and your connections with the program. Do you think that the school prioritizes USC program to win a championship? Is 8-9 wins, does that suffice nowadays? Do they actually want a national championship caliber team? I don't get the sense from the administration and program that football program is as important as it used to be. So I want to get your thoughts on what do you think the administration, what kind of weight they pulls on getting USC back to its glory days. Thanks, guys.
Hey, thanks, Wagner.
Thanks,
I think
Wagner.
he must read the War Room too. I think
$1 million question, sir.
he's spot on. I think you're exactly right. I think, and that's why Carol Folt's coming in, and there's going to be, probably some sweeping changes in the athletic department. When Pat Hayden comes in and he's content with just, taking an assistant coach and giving him the head coaching job and seeing what he can do. It was more about, hey, he's not going to rock the boat. He's not going to be a big problem for us. You hope he wins games. And I think fans have a hard time with this where they would feel like, oh, they want to hire the best coach possible. I'm like, no, I don't think so. And, we've been told if Pete Carroll was 15 years younger and he came back and he's like, I want to come back to USC, the administration wouldn't want that because he was a coach that would wield a ton of power, and they didn't necessarily want that. So I think you're right. I think now you need to bring in an athletic director that will prioritize that. The USC football is what makes the entire $120 million of that athletic department budget run. It's, if you read John Wilner's piece today in the San Jose Mercury News, how important USC is to the entire Pac-12, they're begging, they're saying like Pac-12 wants USC to hire a good athletic director because they need USC to be back. They're going to redo their TV, the TV contract. They need USC to be good. If USC is not good, they're not going to get a good deal for the TV contract. So hire a good athletic director. So yeah, I think you're right, Wagner, where it's just that wasn't a priority for USC. It was just more about keeping everybody happy and they're doing their same thing. Now you hope you get a new athletic director that's going to come in and hire people that other universities that are your level would hire. USC, their last 3 athletic directors, nobody in the top 100 programs in the country. No one would have hired Lynn Swann for anything. Like that, this is crazy that would happen. No one was going to hire Clay Helton when he was hired. Stop hiring people that only USC would hire. Hire people that the other programs would hire. And I think that's the main thing you got to do. And if you do that, you'll be okay.
And each time they do it, they get a search committee. And what does that search committee come back with? Well, the guy that's down the hall, usually, Well, Clay Helton, we went on a search committee, a national search. We decided the guy down the hall is the one to do it, who doesn't have any coaching experience. So, that's how it's been. It's the people that wield power don't want to give up any power. And the way they've attacked things in the past doesn't show you that, hey, we want to do whatever it takes to become a national power again. It's we want to do whatever it takes so I can maintain my power in standing at the university. That seems like it's been more important to people in the administration than to some people in the administration than it has been for the entirety of USC for the football program to be good.
Yeah, there's a lot of great people in the USC athletic administration that we talk to, and they're frustrated too. It's just they're not the ones making the decisions, which sucks for them because they're part of this big mess. So I think now you get rid of the figurehead stuff going on and you bring in an actual athletic director. It should fix a lot of problems, and they'll know they'll be able to come in and say, these people are good people. We're going to put them in a better working environment. It's, if you're a great worker and you have a whole bunch of great workers around you and you have a bad CEO, it's hard for the company to do well. And I think that's a lot of the situation. And unfortunately, the power just was like so concentrated at the top that it didn't really give the people below them a lot of opportunities to make a difference.
Thanks for the call, Wagner. We appreciate it. Let's go to our next caller. Hello, you are live on Tunnel Vision.
Lots of calls.
Good evening. How's it going?
Good.
I have 2 questions. The first question is, being that the offensive line has struggled, especially, in the battle of the trenches, why are we seeing the same personnel? We have other recruits that we brought in and so forth like that. Why haven't there been any personnel switches? We just seem to be using the same people, just putting them in different spots on the line. And my second question is, speaking about USC tradition and all, the rumor was Jack Del Rio said if the job came open, he would be interested in the job. What would be the likelihood USC would go after, family as far as a coaching option?
Yeah. Let's handle that one first. If Lynn Swann was still the athletic director.
The options are they've done it in the past, so they
Yeah.
could do it again.
Right. And
The
that's
possibility, at
that's the
least.
thing you have to avoid at all costs. Like, do not do that. No more former football players for anything. My 2 rules, I got to go over them again. What are they? You guys know. You got to hire someone who's good at their job. They've done this
Have
job
experience
before.
and don't know the fight song.
And they can't know the fight song.
I feel like we're in
So,
class.
Jack Del Rio, never been a college coach, out. He knows the fight song, out. So, no, he doesn't meet either one of my criteria. Sorry, Jack. Seems like a great guy, but
The
no.
Ryan requirements.
That's the Ryan requirement. If USC would have hired any of the hirings, would have been way better if you just followed my requirements. It's very simple.
I'll take the first question since you took the second one. The offensive line, the reason why they're not subbing in guys, the offensive line played good the first 2 games. You know, they played adequate to good. This game they didn't play very good, and it was mainly in the middle. You know, they just really struggled with the nose tackle. They struggled to complete blocks on the second level, so they were able to pick up 4 or 5 yard gains when there should have been, you know, a few more yards there. So those are things that, and it was partially just because the BYU runs a different defense, and it was the first time they were trying to go against it, so it was troublesome for them. And you got to remember that most of these guys are pretty young as far as experience. Like Brett Nealon has never played before, Jalen McKenzie hadn't really played much, and then Elijah Vera Tucker. So the 3 guys in the middle that have to handle the nose guard and also get to the second level, those are the guys that struggled in this game. I think that you're not seeing much switching in and out there is because there's a big drop off from the top 6. You know, Andrew Voorhees was out this week with a foot ailment, so he hasn't practiced that we've seen this week. I don't believe. Keely, did he see?
No, he's been out.
Okay, so he hasn't practiced this week, so he's unlikely. USC did actually practice Justin Dedich, I found out, at guard last week, so he would be a guy that could come in as a sub. And they like Brett Nealon at center, because I would think that you would want to put Dedich in at center and then move Nealon out, just because of the size, because Dedich is a smaller guy. But they like the way that Brett Nealon is making all the calls and stuff. You know, they're really trusting what he's done, you know, as far as the pre-snap stuff. It's just he was getting manhandled by Tonga, who is I think he's a 22, 23-year-old guy who's 330 pounds or whatever it is. You know, he just overpowered him. Yeah. And that really messed up a lot of things for the offensive line. So I think the offensive line has been okay. You know, but they have to – this is the big game for them. They have to play much better than they did last week. They didn't play great last week, and they lost. That's kind of how it works with this team.
Yeah. I've been saying for a while that I feel like this line's going to play better than we've seen the last couple of years, but it's definitely not as deep as some of those other guys. I don't think it's as talented. So, but the front 5, 6, they like those guys, but there's just not going to be a lot of opportunity to like switch somebody out if they're not doing well. I think there's a big drop-off, like Shotgun said.
Yep, without a doubt. Thanks for the call. We appreciate it. Let's go to the last caller in the queue right now. Hello, you are live on Tunnel Vision.
Hi, this is Chris from Glendora.
What's up, Chris from Glendora?
I called before, actually. But I have a question. First off, I wanted to say you guys were totally right about the false positive games. Called it perfectly. And then my question is about the run defense. I think I've seen poor angles, you know, by the team. They're taking poor angles, poor tackling, and poor run discipline. Are they doing anything to address that? Because I'm kind of fed up with Clancy. Thank you.
Thanks for the call.
Yeah.
So we actually talked about that with the defensive players and coaches this week about, they all mentioned, there was poor tackling against BYU. And so we kind of had followed up and said, well, are you doing anything different this week in practice, different tackling drills, et cetera? And it was kind of like, no, we're doing the same things. It's early in the season. We need to get it right. Tackling will kind of come as the season progresses. So that's kind of the answer we got from the players and coaches. And Greg Burns was talking about how Isaiah Pulamau didn't really tackle well, but he said it's not a concern. So we're kind of getting that duality where they know there's a problem. They see it on the tape in BYU, but whether or not it's really fully addressed in practice, if there's fundamental changes to address tackling, one, we can't see, and two, it sounds like they haven't done it. So interesting.
Yeah, I think the keys are going to be, you want to see, we saw Pellier Noah Teote with 9 tackles, second on the team. He was playing a lot better. You want to see John Houston continue to make, if those guys can clean up a lot of the messes and make tackles, I think you can maybe make up for some of the other mistakes. But to me, it's like the 2 inside linebacker guys. If they're tackling well, then it might just by osmosis kind of spread out to the rest of the defense.
Yeah, the defense missed 15 tackles in that game. Pellier only had one. So I thought he played great. It was his best game of the season by far. He made 9 tackles, but he was flying all over the place. He was in the backfield making some big stops there. I think not having Christian Rector hurt them a lot last game. They actually made an adjustment in the second half. They went with Hunter Echols as basically the starting defensive end on the opposite side of Drake Jackson. I think the altitude also played a factor on that defensive line because you could see guys are just winded. I mean, Keely and I on the sidelines, we could tell, there was a difference there with the altitude.
Without a doubt.
And I think that it hurt the defensive line more because you didn't have Rector. And then Connor Murphy wasn't playing great, so he got kind of subbed. He got demoted to the second group. So I think that there were just some different things in that area that the defensive line didn't play great. I think they'll play much better in this game. They're going to be fired up. Jay Tufele, obviously being from Utah, he wants to play good against his hometown team, basically. Yep. I just think that it starts up front with them. And then, like you said, the linebackers have to be able to do a little bit more. Maybe they need to widen them out a little bit. They've stopped runs up the middle. 3 games so far. They haven't really given up runs up the middle much. Maybe they have to make a little bit of an adjustment just schematically to be able to help out with some of those edge runs. We also got to remember, to an extent, it is a different defensive front than last year. It is now a true 4-2 instead of a 2-4-5. So maybe that's having an impact. It shouldn't be. But maybe it is. I mean, maybe it's just the linebackers aren't used to being in those particular spots and not having the rush ins on the outside to help push things back into the middle. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the call. We appreciate it. Let's go into rapid fire. It's 7:52 right now.
Yeah.
We just got more callers, but let's go rapid fire. First off, Derek says, how is the O-line going to play better when they are spaced so far apart? It seems like we are beating ourselves in the trenches.
Well, if you looked at BYU's defensive alignment, they were spaced really wide apart. So a lot of times they were inside, the 2 defensive ends were inside of the tackles. So that made an issue just as far as reaching sometimes. But when you were crashing down, I think Austin Jackson did a great job crashing down on the edge, and that was where they were having success with those power runs and stuff coming behind him, and Vera Tucker getting to the second level. It just depends on the spacing of a defense. There are some runs against some defensive fronts that just aren't going to work because you're spaced out a little bit more. Yeah. But there's other ones that work a lot better because you're spaced out anymore. So you just got to figure out what you're seeing from the other team across from you and attack, what you're seeing.
Rapid fire. SNS Productions has a burning question that I think he's been asking for the last hour. He says, why doesn't USC throw more deep balls? He says, Keely, this question is very important to me, so please answer. There you go.
They did throw the one to Eric Kromenhoek, but I thought that was definitely a deficiency from this USC offense. They like to throw in those intermediate routes, which I love because they haven't done a lot of that the last couple of years. But when you start relying on that, that's where Utah was kind of flooding the whole area with the linebackers would drop back and really kind of take that away. So it might be a fake, and then you kind of go over the top. If you remember the Eric Kromenhoek play, Keaton Slovis kind of escaped pressure, rolled to his left, and Kromenhoek gets beyond the defense. And I think that's where the soft spots were going to be. The soft spots, a lot of times they can be over the middle. It wasn't soft. It was soft for Stanford over the middle. It wasn't soft like that for BYU. I think you had to go over the top a little bit more. And he did that, once or twice, but just not that often. So I think there was more of that opportunity there. They just didn't take advantage of it.
I think that they need to throw deep occasionally, because you're going to get one-on-one matchups. They were playing cover 1 and cover 3 in that BYU back end, so there were opportunities to go one-on-one. You did with the Pittman touchdown. The interception of Drake London, those type of plays require that you run the ball first because the linebackers didn't move on the play-action fake at all. So, but if later in the game there are some plays, and we point this out on film today, which you guys can watch tomorrow, that – there were opportunities there, openings, because they were running the ball so much, the linebackers would bite on the play-action fake. And that changes a lot of things, especially when a team is playing a lot of zone with their linebackers right there. So there were man coverages behind it with zones in front a lot of the time. So that means there's one-on-one matchups that you have to take advantage of on the outside.
D. Altorio, I believe that's how you say it, has been asking this question repeatedly. He says, Keely, question for the show. If we make the mistake and keep Helton in a bad season, like a 6-6 record, what will the impact be on our commits?
it'd be terrible on recruiting, which one of the reasons why you won't see that happen. If he goes 6-6 again, he's not.
It would be devastating to recruiting.
Nolan says, why isn't Ethan Ray playing? Is he redshirting? He's still coming off that ACL injury. I don't even think he's cleared to practice yet. He's still rehabbing. So that is why. We have a question from Chris on Facebook who says, question for Ryan. Would he change his response to my question a few tunnel visions ago around Clancy's inability to coach a defense to counter a modern/mobile offense?
No, I mean, it's Clancy was doing. I mean, it's not the greatest defense in the world, but it's fine. I mean, they first of all, the first 2 drives for BYU that they scored on were after turnovers, where they got the ball, pretty much in the USC red zone. It wasn't a great defensive performance, but it wasn't the worst in the world. It wasn't all that terrible. So no, I don't change my opinion on that.
I mean, Zach Wilson started the game 4 of 15 on throws beyond 3 yards. So the defense was playing pretty good. He got hot later in the game, but actually they only scored 1 time once he got hot. So,
yeah. Again, USC comes out and doesn't score in the third quarter.
They only had 10 plays in the third quarter, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kay on YouTube says, why do teams consistently outcoach Clay Helton? Is it because he just doesn't get it, or is he stubborn?
Well, a little bit of both. There's some stubbornness there. I'm sure every coach is stubborn, but he's being outcoached because they're not making adjustments as quick as other teams do.
Yeah.
They've done it better this year, I would say that. But that's a collective group. That's not just Helton. It comes from the entire staff.
I think there's better coaches out there.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just have a better coach.
Lance on Facebook says, Shotgun, do you think the third pick against BYU was legit? It looked like it hit the ground. Still shouldn't have come to this, ?
If you see my Twitter, then no, I did not think it was an interception. I thought it was similar to the C.J. Pollard one, where basically the ball goes through and you see the tip hit the ground. There's just a better angle on the C.J. Pollard ball. I thought it was closer, but it's hard to overturn that type of play, especially in the mayhem that ensued afterwards. But I thought the referees were pretty bad on both sides for most of the game anyway.
Yes.
So
they were terrible.
How many reviews were there? Like 47, it felt like?
They were like, the review was so long that I could have wrote a couple tweets and walked around. It was awkward. It was weird. Moving on to our...
The more interesting one was the Michael Pittman touchdown.
I think that's what I'm talking about.
The play was reviewed before they made a call.
Yeah.
Because from my vantage point, as I was right near the end zone, was watching the head referee on the mic, listening on the headset, listening to them upstairs to see what they were going to say.
Rapid fire,
Never
Mr.
seen it
Gunn.
before. Never seen it before.
Trek Ranger says, was it just me, or did Stephen Carr look tentative and not as physical as he did in the prior 2 games?
Just seemed like it was hard to get him going, and it just wasn't getting into space right away. There was a lot of hesitation, it seemed. It just didn't seem to click for him.
So on my rewatch of the game, I actually upgraded my initial thoughts of Stephen Carr.
Because that was something we talked about during the game, Shaka and I. We thought he was being a little tentative.
And then I downgraded Marquis Stepp because Stepp had some, I think it was more the offensive line actually with those 2 guys. And what they were kind of asking them to do, they were asking Carr to go outside much more. And I thought Stepp missed a couple of opportunities that he could have got some more yardage. So I thought he had a really, really good game at first, and I downgraded a little bit to a good game. Whereas Carr, I thought he was tentative initially, but then when I rewatched it, he's still making guys miss, but it was just more the nose tackles were pushing stuff in the back where he wasn't able to get going as quickly. He still probably made 5, 6, 7 guys miss on the day. I mean, I feel like every other run of his, he makes the first guy miss.
Yeah, easy. It's just there was always in the backfield this time. It wasn't like where he was getting the ball and it's 5 yards down this field, and then you make somebody miss.
I mean, you look at the shovel pass. That's an 11-yard gain because he actually has a little bit of clearance to start going instead of having people at his feet all the time.
Yeah.
We have a question from Jerry who says, how is Rector doing? Christian Rector apparently practiced both Monday and Tuesday. We weren't able to see how much he was able to do since we're not in practice, but Clay Helton said that he's still a game time decision. They're waiting and feeling that out because Helton said even though he's cleared for practice, when you have a guy who's 245 going against maybe a 300-pound guy, you have to have confidence in that ankle to go full speed, and so they're not fully confident about that. So they're going to wait and see with Rector, but that's something to definitely watch for because Rector is a boost on that line. Let's go to Beck Stein, who said, is the air raid really a viable system? Seems like it's a temporary offensive style considering USC is known for student body right.
There's like 12 air raid quarterbacks starting in the NFL right now. I think it's a viable system.
The teams are having a lot of success with it at other places. You see tenets of it in the Alabama offense and the Clemson offense, and Oklahoma is a full-blown air raid. So those are 3 of the 4 teams that were in the college football playoff last year.
Yeah. So yes, it's viable.
I mean, USC before the 70s, they were a wing T team or whatever it was in the 20s. Did you say when they got to the 60s, like, we can't do this student body right thing, because that's not what they did 30 years ago or 40 years ago. The game evolves.
Yeah.
Let's go to a question from Warren, who says, I wrote in 2 weeks ago and asked why didn't USC stretch the field and stretch the defense with someone like Velus Jones or Amon-Ra St. Brown? Looks like a missed opportunity. Any chance this week?
I think they missed an opportunity. They needed to go to St. Brown, certainly more. And like I said before, they needed to take the top off the defense and kind of spread it out a little bit. They didn't do that. I thought it was a missed opportunity.
Velus Jones only played one snap on offense the last game. But if Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is a we'll see, I think is what Clay Helton said today, then maybe there's opportunities there for him to get more playing time.
Let's go to a question from Robert, who says, our edge tackling in the BYU game was horrible. Nobody fears our defense, even though it's been simplified. Guys are not showing improvement. Why?
The tackling is the biggest issue. I think that they're getting there maybe better than they were last year at times. The two biggest areas are tackling and misdirection, just reading plays correctly. There were some slowly, it seems like USC is getting better at the misdirection. I think they did better on play action type stuff against BYU. And late in the game in overtime, they tried to run that fake reverse again, and they actually did their job instead of trying to do too much.
Yep.
I think that's part of the issue is like everyone wants to do two people's job. You can only do one.
Yep.
Do your job. They were getting pressure and not necessarily getting the sacks and getting those kind of tackles. So that to me, I agree with it. That's a big issue right now.
A lot of holding in that game, too, on both offensive lines.
Yeah, weird.
Yep. Sid says, Ben Griffiths is our backup punter that bad. I just find it hard to believe that we get outclassed year in, year out when it comes to punting.
Well, now you got an Australian punter battle with Utah.
I'll say.
Yeah, so it should be interesting. We'll see. We can only tell you what we see in practice, and it doesn't,
Clay Helton said he had 3 inside the 20. Now, I would prefer those inside the 10 because I think he's good enough to shoot for that rather than getting at the 19-yard line at times. But he also had a, 47, 57-yarder or something like that. So his average isn't terrible. It's just you want to see more consistently going for it.
Yeah, he's not beating Reed Budrovich from last year. Like, he's got a lower average than Reed Budrovich.
Wow.
So that's the thing. It's like he should be a weapon, and he's adequate.
Yeah, I think that they're not being aggressive enough with him.
No.
If you can be aggressive with a punter.
We don't know, but we feel like it's more of what he's being coached to do. If you just said go out there and punt, then I think you would see a different story. I just don't think that's what they're telling him to do.
Yep. Alrighty, let's go to a caller we have. Shotgun, I'll come back to you if any rapid fire questions you want to hit on, and then we'll do our game predictions for what's going to happen on Friday and then wrap it up.
Yeah.
So let's go to our caller at some point.
Hello, caller.
Hello. You're live
Hello?
on Tunnel Vision.
Hey, group, how are you?
Good. Thanks for calling in.
Awesome. Hey, it was nice to meet you guys at the game and take the picture. Thank you for taking some time to do that. That was awesome.
Nice to meet you. It was
my
Andrew, right?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for remembering me. Yeah, that was awesome. My question is that do you all feel like our defensive coach is going to be very aggressive and go all out to stop the run and to be very aggressive on blitzing the quarterback? And also, special request if we could try to get Joel Klatt as a special guest on the show. That'd be awesome. Thank you all for your time. Fight on.
Thank you.
Thanks. Joel's pretty busy with the #1 Fox duties. Like, we'll get Bruce Feldman on or something. I don't know if we can get Joel. Try. I mean, I've talked to him and stuff. We'll see. I'll see if we can pull a few favorites. It might be tough during the season because they're so
a busy man.
And I don't even think he lives here. I think he's still in Colorado or something. So that'd be Bruce lives like, a few miles away, so we can get someone like that a little bit easier. What was the question? I totally forgot what
he said, do you think USC's defense will try and blitz more?
I don't know if I'll blitz more, but I think they're going to focus on Zach Moss. I think Clancy's going to try to stop the run, try to contain Tyler Huntley, and see what he can do throwing the football, because he hasn't had to throw the ball downfield a whole lot more. And so I think the focus is going to be do what you can to contain Zach Moss. That's my guess.
Can you contain Britton Covey? Because otherwise, I man up and force Solomon Enos and Brian Thompson to beat you, because those are wide receivers that USC ended up not really pushing hard for. They're kind of recruiting them a little bit and just, we don't, no thanks. Solomon Enos is the son of Curtis Enos, former running back from Penn State, was the teammate of Austin Jackson in high school as well. So, they didn't really push hard for either one of those guys. So I got to think you trust your DBs to lock up on them and try to contain Zach Moss. Now, the biggest thing is the tackling issues and the fact that Zach Moss runs through tackles all the time.
Yeah.
His yards after contact, I think he led the Pac-12 last year. I think he's got like 400 something yards so far this year, and like 300 and something of them are after contact. I mean, he is a beast when it comes to if you don't gang tackle, that's the biggest thing. You got to get more than one guy there to tackle him too.
You want to talk about matchups too? I forgot to mention this. He leads the nation in forced broken tackles, and it's like double the next guy. So he's not easy to tackle, and USC has some tackling problems. So there's the matchups. It's tough.
I would like to see what the numbers are on Stephen Carr per touch. Because I think he probably has better per touch. He's made so many guys miss this year.
Yeah, that's
his are less broken tackles.
Yeah, they're more just
tackles.
missing. Yeah.
Well, thanks for the call, Andrew. We appreciate it.
So you guys took a picture with him in Provo?
We did.
Nice.
Yeah, we actually saw a lot of people there, so it was cool. A lot of people yelled at me, "Love the show," and I was like, I don't know which one, but thank you. So
we've done a lot of shows.
Yeah, true.
Be specific.
Yes, but thank you all for everyone I saw. Nice meeting you. We have a Facebook question from Robert who says, why are we having trouble with a zone defense? Did Harold not have an answer in the spread? If that's an opponent's answer for our air raid, what's the answer? Because our run game was not our answer. Lots of answers.
I think it's where you're throwing the ball. I think Slovis was pretty comfortable throwing in a certain area, and that's where a lot of the defenders were. You had to kind of adjust that. And they kind of adjusted to just running the football as opposed to doing that. But, yeah, I think when you were following guys in man coverage, Slovis wasn't worried about a linebacker kind of jumping underneath. And we talked about that in the pregame show. Like, if there's going to be a problem at BYU, it's because they're dropping more dudes into coverage and someone that he doesn't see. He didn't see the weak side linebacker cutting across. And Taylor Mays, we talked about this too, where you're the linebacker, and if you're in a zone coverage, you're sitting there looking at the eyes of the quarterback. The receiver is right next to you, so as soon as he's going to throw it, you can make a break on the ball. Stuff like that was happening, and it was very different than what the defense he saw against Stanford.
Yeah, I said it was going to be a unique challenge from the Stanford game. It's going to be a lot different. And if he passed that, then I was going to jump on the hype train. But I was a little slow to jump on it because it's there's two different ways to go about defending someone. I think that he'll grow from it. I think something else USC could have done, we again on film study, we talk about there's some outs that he could have run, some speed outs, because not only were they were playing man coverage on the back end and then playing zone underneath. So it's kind of like it was mostly cover one, but it was like a robber situation is what they call it, when they just kind of let the linebacker kind of have free reign and do like you said, just kind of watch the eyes. Whereas the cornerbacks were just taking off. They were jetting, making sure there was no long balls, so they were playing bail coverage. So if you run an out right there, the cornerback's already turned and kind of running,
gone,
and that leaves that open because the linebackers aren't all the way across the field. They're basically inside the numbers, so you have to spread the field out a little bit more. And if you run the ball more, like I said, then that opens up play action opportunities to suck those linebackers in, which they did a little bit in the second half better.
Yep. Alrighty. I'm going to wrap it up with that. Shotgun, do you have any rapid fire that you suddenly want? Because I'm about to shut this down.
No, we're good.
Predictions, guys. What do you think will happen on Friday?
Because of all the matchup issues, I just think this is not going to be a real pretty game for USC. I originally said 38-21, and I think when we did our pregame radio show, which is going to be tomorrow night, Thursday night at midnight on KABC. Forgot to mention that. I said 11 p.m. before on some of the other shows, but it'll be midnight Thursday night, so basically Friday morning, right before the morning of the game, from midnight to 1 a.m. KABC will have our radio show. Taylor Mays, Keely, Shaka, myself, Chris Trevino. It'll be good stuff. I think I said on that, I said 38-17, but I really think it's going to be 38-21 Utah.
USC's best opportunity to win this game is to win the turnover battle, which they've not really done so far. So if they take care of the football, then I think they'll be in this game. I think it'll be close. And I think it's going to be like a 28-24 game. USC can win if they win the turnover battle, but I got Utah winning because USC has not won the turnover battle.
So you think it's going to go right on the spread?
Yeah, I trust Vegas when it
Vegas
comes to
is smart.
spreads.
Vegas is smart.
Very true. I have no confidence in this matchup for USC. I just think it's too much of their weaknesses, and Utah is just so good up front that I have to go 28-10 Utah.
10 points.
Yeah.
That'd be rough.
Yep. Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up on that note.
On a high note, yay,
All right.
Keely, super
Sorry,
optimistic.
my bad. Debbie Downer
Well,
strikes again.
Maybe we're all wrong.
Hey, I was wrong last week, so I could be
We
wrong
can all
again.
be wrong all the time. It's
True,
fine.
it happens. Alrighty, we'll be back on Sunday, or Sunday, right? Yeah.
Sunday night. Yeah, we'll do Sunday night
Okay.
after the game.
We'll
yeah.
be back on Sunday to recap what happened on Friday. Make sure you stay tuned for that 7 p.m. That's Shotgun. That's Ryan. I'm Keely. We'll see y'all next time.
See ya.
Bye.